Okay, we are back for subsystem 2, or at least the first part of it, which is going to be morphology. Now, first of all, let's recap what we've talked about so far. The first thing we talked about was basically the building blocks of language, the smallest unit, which is where everything starts, which are these little units of sound. And the set of units of sound that we build everything in our language out of are called phonemes. And then we put the phonemes together to build our words. So here we have got a bunch of our building blocks, a bunch of our bricks that we put together to make a house. And the technical word for a full house, or at least a full word with all these bits put together, is a lexeme. But there is a step in between getting from the phonemes up to full words. I lied to you a little bit. The bricks build the house, but there's a step in there we've got to look at too. And that step is this. See how this house is built of lots of rooms, and all of the rooms together build a house? These parts of a word are called morphemes. Now, you can think of it a little bit, it still works in the house analogy, because if a full word is a whole house, you've got different rooms in the house that work together, that you need all of them to make your house work. Some of the rooms would be fine on their own. Maybe you've got a one-room apartment that you can put a bed and stuff like that in, and a small kitchenette and stuff, and that's fine. Just one room as your house. That'll work sometimes. But then you've got other rooms that on their own do not function as a complete house. So your toilet on its own, it's a very useful thing to have, but it does not form a whole house. You can't just live in your toilet. Similarly, the laundry, very useful to have, but the laundry on its own will not make a whole house. So in my analogy here, basically words are like this as well, where you've got little units that are like the rooms of the house, I guess, that you can put together to make full words. And this is very, very useful because morphemes are things that allow us to build lots of words. Very, very useful. Like the Swiss Army knife that I'm hiding behind my picture in the bottom right. Instead of having to come up with a new word for every single idea that you have, often you can build a new word for it using existing words you've got and then attaching bits to it or combining other words and things like that. All of these bits you're sticking together are called morphemes. So as I said, instead of having to create a whole new word for everything, what I said there. Get pre-existing words, you add different endings, you add different bits at the start, and you stick things to them and you get bigger words. For example, these people here are in a marathon. They are running. So you've got the word run. So this is a full functioning word on its own. And so you call this a free morpheme. It does not need other things attached to it to be meaningful. It's totally fine on its own. It's a free morpheme. But the man here is running. So the word running, we've added stuff to it. We've added this thing, ing. Now, ing is a morpheme. It is a chunk that has a specific meaning and specific usage, but ing does not work on its own. Run works on its own just fine. It's totally fine word on its own, but ing does not. You have to attach it to something for it to actually serve its purpose. So in this case, running, the ing is telling you that he is currently running. And the word for that is a bound morpheme. It has to be tied onto something else to be usable. So all these morphemes, you can have free morphemes, which are a morpheme on their own, but they can also they're a morpheme that you build words out of, but they can also just be a word on their own. And then there's bound morphemes, which have a meaning, they have a purpose, but they can't function as a word on their own. They have to be attached to something else, have to be bound to them. So let's give you some more examples. I just said run. And here's some other things you can put on run. You can put the bound morpheme S. So you might get something with that. An E, a Y at the end of something. You might get an ing. You might get And then you put any of these onto the word run, and you get a whole family of related words. So like he runs, or I've got some runs on the board if you're playing cricket. Maybe runny, something that is like running because it's very moist, like this runny honey up the top there. Or maybe running, he is running, or I like running, or all sorts of things. All these grammatical and meaning, extra layers of meaning and stuff you can build by just getting a word like run and then attaching more things to it. Or a runner. So a person who runs is a runner. So all of these little endings and things are very useful. Now, the technical term for anything that you attach to a stem, you got your free morpheme, you've got or the key stem in a word. Anything you attach to it is called an affix. And in English, we use three main types of affixes. The first one is a prefix. So if you think about it, pre means before. And an example of a prefix is something like dis, which means to undo something. I just use it anyway. So for example, you've got the verb connect, and then you make a new word, disconnect. Or you've got the word do, and you've got a prefix re, which means again. So redo, do it again. You've got exist, and then you put the prefix co, which means with. So coexist means to exist together. So lots of these things on this picture here, you can see there the three examples I just gave. We had connect, do, and exist. And each of the three of them, I put a prefix on it and made a new word. So disconnect or redo or coexist. So prefixes, pre goes before it. The next kind is a suffix, which goes after it. For example, the S plural is a suffix. Like I've got one dog, and now I've got two dogs, and I added the S on it to make it plural. That's a very, very, very useful suffix, is the plural S. Or ish. So you've got the word baby, and then I say, he's acting a bit baby-ish. So that's also a useful suffix. And then we had before on the slide, we had run, and then we had a runner. So a person who runs is a runner. And then we had maybe another example, like there's the verb to adore someone who is super, super cute. You can say they're adorable. So able, there is the word able on its own, but it also works as a suffix, adorable. Here's the table explaining with exactly those ones I did there. So berry, and then we had the spelling change, but ignore that. We'll talk about that another time. But you've still just added an S for plural. So berry, and then added the plural S, berries, baby, babyish, run, runner, adore, adorable. Adding on all of these suffixes has also helped us make new words. There's another kind of affix that you can use, but this one's quite rare. This is called an infix. In English, we don't use them very much, but you have a certain small set of them that you've heard before, such as abso-fucking-lutely, when you put fucking in the middle of another verb, into the middle of another word to emphasize things. As in the sentence, this is abso-fucking-lutely the only time you'll hear me say this. I looked some examples on the internet. They suggested abso-freaking-lutely, but you're all old enough and you've heard me say fuck before anyway if you're in my class. So, English likes affixation. You can have some long examples here, like I put one. This is a word that exists, but you never use it really in real life. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. So you've got the stem establish, and then disestablish, and then disestablishment, or establishment, and then disestablishment. And then someone who wants to disestablish things could be a disestablishmentarian. And then someone who's opposed to them could be an anti-disestablishmentarian. And then the thought process and philosophy of someone who opposes people who want to disestablish things would be an anti-disestablishment. It would be anti-disestablishmentarianism. For some reason, this word was really popular for a long time as an example of a long, long word in English. Really, it's not a word we'd use very often. Okay, now, Australian English also likes certain suffixes. In colloquial Australian English, you know some examples we use a lot. So, for example, Australian English, when a colloquial Australian English, we like the suffixes O and R and E to make things kind of cute or friendly or something like that. For example, you've got a mate called Steve. He might get nicknamed Steve-O. And then maybe you want to inquire whether Steve-O is going to buy a slab from the bottle shop, and you might ask him, "You going to the bottle-o?" And then maybe he would answer, "Nah, I'm grabbing brekkie at Macca's." So people would say, "Oh, look, he's just shortening words." But it's not just shortening words, like McDonald's, shortening it to Macca's. Not only have you shortened McDonald's to the Mac, you've still added a suffix. So you've still added an A suffix there. So there's two things going on. You've shortened it, but then you've added an ending. And the ending in Australian English serves to make things sound like it's like a friendly, informal thing, signaling we're kind of mates and we're talking on a matey, casual level. So brekkie instead of breakfast and stuff. So Australian English has these characteristic suffixes that serve this purpose. Now, I'm hiding the meme there, but it says, this is from a Macca's ad, and it says, "We arrived at McDonald's and you made us Macca's." Anyway, I'm going to show you a few more things. If you just want to talk about Englang, you don't need to watch the rest of this. So English likes affixation, and it's very useful in English. But just for funs, I'm going to show you something. Just for funsies, I'm going to show you something here from another language, just to show you how crazy languages, or how much further languages can take this whole affixation thing of like joining morphemes together and making a super long new word. Now, it can get really long. Like, for example, I'm going to show you a word in the language Mohawk, which is a Native American language spoken by the people, the group who the haircutter is named after. And basically, in a lot of Native American languages, you can have words that in English would be a whole sentence, but they make these massive long words by getting like a stem and then just adding prefix and prefix and prefix and suffix and suffix and suffix and so on to build a whole thing. So you've got a stem that means door. You've got a prefix that means he or she is doing something. You've got a prefix that means it happened in the past. You've got a prefix that means it's happening again. There's after the door, there's another stem that means closing. Then there's a suffix that means un, so it's like unclosing something. And then there's another suffix that means for someone else. And then there's another suffix that says there, it's got perf under it, which means perfective, which just means it's finished. And then you put them all together and you get a word that in English would be a whole sentence, and it's this. All of that joined together and you get one word that means she opened the door for him again. So if you want to compare it, you could have all of this. Here's the word. Here's the full word. She opened the door for him again. And then if I show you all of the morphemes strung together, you could have a bit of a ponder and work out which morpheme has given what meaning to make that whole long thing. So the native speakers of this language, their brain is decoding that. They hear that whole long thing, and their brain is decoding all of those morphemes for that language, for that meaning. So a lot of languages, particularly in certain areas, a lot of Native American languages, some Indigenous Australian languages also have words like this and have structure like this, where it's just morpheme, 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 huge long words. I might show you some examples of that later. If you just hear for the Englang, you don't necessarily need to know this part of it. That's just a little bit of bonus. I just wanted to show you how much bigger it can get than just the English version. Okay, that's all for now.